The death cult represents the apex of the Dark Pyramid. This is where Sauron, the personification of evil, an ancient extra-dimensional being, one of the old ones, and his infernal spider demons reside, the highest authority in the hierarchy of evil in this world and beyond. From here, the dark Nordic alien clans, the reptilian castes and their grey subordinates, the satanic alien hybrid bloodlines and their dynasties, the royal houses, secret societies like Skullbones, the CIA, MI6, the Mossad, the military, the cartels, the mafias, and organized crime bosses. The presidents and prime ministers, if and as far as they are connected, receive their orders. To oppose the death cult, the top of the spiritual pyramid of evil, is therefore to oppose all those who are subordinate to the death cult. Whether those who oppose the death cult are seen or familiar with whomever, as long as it is not the devil himself, is irrelevant in terms of possible compromise. Acquaintance, affiliation, and even direct relationship are irrelevant as long as the opposition to the death cult is sincere and substantial. To oppose the death cult and its one-eyed master is to oppose the root of all evil. When the root is removed and the master defeated, the dark hordes of Mordor will be in turmoil and flee in all directions. The death cult has cells in every intelligence agency in the world. They target the top positions with obvious preference. However, their occupation is constantly changing as all positions of power in civilization are fought over by different forces. These cells within agencies have special divisions tasked with political blackmail and grooming and parasitic pedophile reptilian interests and integration into organized pedophile networks. This happens in all agencies in all nations, not just the CIA, MI6, and Mossad. These are merely the most notorious for systematically engaging in this practice. The reach of the death cult is extensive. It is deeply rooted in human civilization. The city of London, in particular, is a historical stronghold of the death cult. The influence of the satanic dynasty on Washington and Israel Tel Aviv is strong. These nations, cities, and agencies are only superficially connected, but the reptilian death cult cells within them are one and the same and are in constant communication and cooperation. The Belgian State Security Service, VSSE, for example, was predictably involved in the cover-up of the Marc Dutroux case, an organized satanic child sex ring involving dozens of Belgian politicians, judges, and police officers, as well as the Belgian monarchy, senior members of the European Union and NATO. When this came out, they murdered 27 witnesses, at least as far as is known, most of them in broad daylight, in a series of murders with the obvious involvement of the Belgian state and police and European secret services to cover it all up. Epstein was an operative in one of the death cult's special branches, presumably in a joint venture between the CIA and Mossad. Pedophilia for the harvesting of life energy by dark entities. Pedophilia for criminal blackmail. Satanic ritual murder for satanic life energy harvesting of terror and suffering. The main areas of importance to the death cult are 4. Censorship, disease, human trafficking. Trump essentially opposes all of this. One cannot be in league with the likes of Epstein or his masters and at the same time resolutely oppose the death cult. The two are mutually exclusive. It's like water and oil. And there is no acting, no intrigue, and no staging possible. They are quite simply opposing forces acting in conflicting interests. The Russia-Ukraine conflict causes more deaths and disappearances for organ harvesting and children in sex rings in a single day than Epstein's network achieves in a lifetime. And Trump is committed to ending this conflict immediately and bringing stability to the region. This goes against the interests of the death cult and its survival. Disease is one of the most important means to an end for the death cult, so they rely on causing widespread disease. To engage in causal research is contrary to the survival of the death cult, what Trump promotes. Keeping the population ignorant is paramount to the death cult, and this is accomplished through censorship. Trump is committed to ending it immediately. This is detrimental to the survival of the death cult. Human trafficking is essential for the destruction of families, sexual and labor exploitation, political extortion, and pedophilic parasitism for the reptilian death cult. Trump vehemently opposes this practice and calls for the death penalty for human traffickers, among other things. This would then also apply to those like Epstein. This is the level of highest relevance, the core of the geopolitical, and by deduction and prediction the exopolitical and essentially the spiritual level where the most reliable insights into true intentions can be gained. Below this level, it becomes murky. It is the level of convoluted social interactions and relationships and the machinations of deceivers and bad actors, such as intelligence agencies and dilettante amateurs who confuse names, dates, and events and draw false conclusions. It is the level of events and people on which the interest of the majority is focused. After all, great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. What happens at the level of events and people can provide clues, but answers to the big questions can only be found at the level of ideas. One can delve into the lower levels to investigate and answer some of the circulating questions to put minds at ease, but the level of ideas has already provided the relevant answers that are needed. Investigations at this level lead to murky snapshots of relationships that reflect only 1/100th of reality. As seemingly interesting and relevant as these connections on the whiteboard of conspiracies may be, it's basically a sensationalist and conspiracy soap opera without enough substance to work with, let alone make decisions on. What people equate with the so-called elite are not basically all the wealthy, but the money-hoarding satanic dynasties. There are countless wealthy individuals who are not part of the satanic hierarchy, from millionaires to multimillionaires to billionaires. Billionaires are hardly part of the middle class compared to the dark dynasties, as they literally amass trillions and can also literally print real money. There are many cases of billionaires funding political operations that are in direct opposition to the satanic hierarchy and their agendas, and this is not referring to publicly known cases, but cases where you have to dig deeper to find out which billionaire is funding them behind the scenes. There are evil billionaires, there are good billionaires, and there are more or less ordinary average Joe billionaires who are not strongly polarized on the spectrum of good and evil. They are not even involved in the spiritual battle, nor do they know about it. They're too busy with their ultimate cars and art collections and real estate portfolios and trust funds and the donor-funded Ivy League educations of their spoiled progeny and important worldly things like that. Trump was in touch with people like Clinton, Epstein, and many other shady characters at irregular intervals. Their civilian business interests were intertwined. He has admitted that. But that doesn't make them a tight-knit band of accomplices in criminal activities outside of business dealings. It is an acquaintance, a coexistence, an arrangement for mutual benefit, a grin and bear it situation. Trump and Epstein were acquaintances who moved in the same social circles, attended events, traveled together, and socialized. The world of high finance is a very small circle. One inevitably runs into each other, be it in business or at gala events or charity events because of the tax benefits, and one depends on each other. That can hardly be avoided. This makes diplomacy necessary. Compliments are a means to this end. There is no friendship in politics, as many top politicians are quoted as saying, and yet you see them all smiling and shaking hands in public. In private, however, they loathe each other and plot against one another. It won't be much different in business life. To view and portray acquaintances and occasional socializing as a strong alliance or deep friendship is either based on a ridiculously simplistic view of the world and childish naivety, or is done with nefarious, reputation-damaging intent. In a 2002 interview with New York Magazine, Trump commented on Epstein's particular interest in young women, saying he likes beautiful women, and many of them are quite young. This is an act of public exposure of Epstein. It was a hint at Epstein's true pedophilic tendencies. It's a soft exposure that doesn't alarm the completely clueless, but it's enough exposure to signal to the observant. That was a good thing to do. It's a soft exposure, diplomatically disguised as a flattering remark, a subtlety that the vain don't notice, and dark-siders are usually vain. Trump had banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago in the early 2000s following an incident between Epstein and an underage girl who worked at the club. Following Epstein's arrest in 2019, Trump publicly distanced himself from Epstein, stating that he was not a fan of Epstein and had not spoken to him in 15 years. Trump emphasized that he was one of the few people in upper-class circles who had taken action against Epstein by banning him from Mar-a-Lago. Epstein's private flight logs do not list Trump as a passenger on Epstein's planes to the infamous Pedo Island. Trump flew on Epstein's plane 7 times, 4 times in the year 1993, and once each in the years 1994, 1995, and 1997. According to flight logs released in 2021, the flights took place between Palm Beach, Florida, and New York, and on some of these flights, Trump flew with his entire family, including his nanny. Epstein bought his private island, Little St. James, in 1998, 1 year after the last flight with Trump. Trump used to be a Democrat until he wasn't.
The politicians. They've had me to their homes. They've introduced me to their children. I've become their best friends in many instances. They've asked for my endorsement, and they always wanted my money. And even called me really a dear, dear friend. But then, suddenly, decided when I ran for president as a Republican that I've always been a no-good, rotten, disgusting scoundrel. And they totally forgot about me.
Given that it was Trump who fueled the Obama birth certificate case, he can't be too committed a Democrat. Donald Trump began publicly questioning President Barack Obama's citizenship and the legitimacy of his birth certificate in early 2011. Trump was the most prominent figure to claim that Obama was not born in the United States and therefore ineligible to be president. Obama is a snake who cheated his way into office, just like George Bush Jr. and Biden. There are divisions and opposing forces at all levels of civilization, in all classes, and even in families. As time goes on, the polarization of light and dark increases, forcing those at the crossroads to one side or the other. And the sides are constantly changing. Darksiders switch to the light side and vice versa. Even if Trump was a shady character at some point, of which there is no hard evidence, what he is doing now is crucial. Since Trump is now going against the fundamental interests of the death cult, who he had a superficial acquaintance with years ago, is completely irrelevant. Personality, history, and whatever else aside, it's in a pragmatist's interest to support what helps oneself. And what Trump is doing benefits, at least for now, those who oppose the elite and the Luciferian death cult. Unsubstantiated attacks on Trump's reputation are designed by agents of the reptilian death cult and regurgitated by fools. They are doing everything they can to damage Trump's reputation. They are very desperate. Occult insights allow a relatively simple and definitive conclusion about such matters. 1. Trump is now opposing the death cult, and significantly so, which threatens their survival. 2. Epstein was a member of the death cult. Therefore, he is a sworn enemy on a spiritual level. 3. The satanic reptilian collective is desperate and is using lies, deception, and projection to tarnish Trump's image.